All righty. Now, here we go. This is Brent Rains for Alternate Perceptions Online Magazine. This is part 5 now of From Psychology to Indian Mounds with Dr. Gregory Little. We're just a few days away from Christmas now. Next, when this comes out, it'll be the 1st of January 2022. How quick the time goes by. So, Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm not looking forward to 2022. I think it'll be a repeat of 20 and 21. So that's just me, though. Maybe it won't be. Who knows?
I got that fear too. I'm hoping not, but
well,
it's kind of looking that way.
Yeah, but glad to do these things. Always good to see you, and
same here.
We'll see where this goes. These are short. I like them. I told you I like the short ones.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do many short ones, and it allows people to hear brief things and not have to commit to an hour or two. So, okay, I'm ready.
All righty. Well, last time we talked, we were going to discuss the Native Americans and the UFO phenomena.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so UFOs. I think we had mentioned earlier that did I mention in a different one of these how I got into UFOs? I know I said that I believed in the extraterrestrial hypothesis just like everybody else. And I don't know how much of that I told, but I don't really know how I got into UFOs. I just know that in the 1960s, in the early 60s, when my family moved to Huntsville, Alabama from Pennsylvania, I read a few UFO books. Of course, there were those 1950s and early 1960s movies, Invaders from Space, all that, loads of them, The Thing, and so on. I remember watching them as a kid, and I suspect in all that, as all this media sinks into your unconscious and your conscious, you develop interest that way. And so I did, and I started looking into it. In the 1960s, I really thought it probably was extraterrestrial. In the late 60s, real late 60s, I got more interested in school because I had to. In the 1970s, I retained an interest in UFOs, but didn't really do a great deal with it. Unlike you, who as a teenager, you went out and visited all these people that had these famous reports and famous abductees and so on. You visited them. I didn't do that. I started doing that approximately 1979, 1980. And I had a master's degree in psychology at the time, and I was working as a drug program director, and then later as a mental health counselor for a while, and then went back to being a drug program director. But I did get involved with APRO, the old APRO, mm-hmm. and I did get involved with some MUFON people. I never joined MUFON, but I went out on several site visits to people that claimed to see UFOs or be abducted with the MUFON people. And I did some regression hypnosis on people. I did a lot of site visits, but I really, at that time, started understanding this is not what it appears to be. Something is amiss here. There's clearly something very real going on, but whatever it is, it's being concealed. And that's like the Native American trickster. The Native American trickster conceals its real appearance and its real nature. You don't know what it is. So in order to understand like a Native American trickster that actually has a lot of knowledge and a lot of beneficial things can come from interacting with it, you have to get past the trickster part first, meaning you can't really be pulled in by it. I don't mean fooled by it, but you can't be trapped by it. The trickster will trap you, a lot like a spider that's making a web. The web is alluring and good looking, but you can get trapped by it. So that's kind of what I think went on and has gone on really with the UFO field for a long time. People get trapped. In psychology, you get trapped by your own beliefs. a belief system. If you believe they're extraterrestrial, that is what you'll focus on. You will ignore reports of paranormal stuff. I vividly recall Walt Andrus, who was then the head of MUFON here in Memphis, saying that the paranormal stuff has nothing to do with UFOs, that the abductions that appear to be almost spiritual in nature have nothing to do with UFOs. What are the UFOs to him? Well, they are physical alien craft, and he just wanted to know what their propulsion is and what they're doing. But all the rest of the stuff has nothing whatsoever to do with UFOs. Well, in the 70s, I became convinced, like many others, and John Keel and yourself at the time, that it did have something to do with the paranormal, but it wasn't really understood. So I didn't really get more involved other than doing some site visits until I got my doctorate. The last thing I wanted to do with a dissertation committee, and at the end, is have somebody in a dissertation committee before it's all approved say, hey, what's your interest in all this UFO nonsense? And then have them give me a lot of trouble for the dissertation. So I was actually pretty clever and all that. I knew what I was doing. That's what I mean by clever. But when I got my doctorate, I started going into the UFO stuff more in earnest. And I immediately started working on a book. It was called The Archetype Experience. It came out in 1984. I got my doctorate in 82, immediately started that book. And in that time period, everything I believed about UFOs changed. And by that, I completely abandoned the extraterrestrial hypothesis. By the way, I am back to that a little bit. I do think the Earth has been visited by aliens. I do. I'm all but certain of that. You can't be certain because you can't prove it, but I'm all but certain. But it's not like people think, and it's not as extensive as people think. But in the course of doing that book, I really dug into Carl Jung's work on archetypes, what he wrote about flying saucers. In fact, that was the title of Jung's last book, published in 1959. It was called Flying Saucers. It was actually a book generated from a monograph that he was working on at the time, that Jung was working on before he died. And a lot of people have misunderstood what Carl Jung said about UFOs. I can't really explain it here. I could take the whole 15 minutes and try and get into it, but I couldn't do it. I could even do it for another hour, and by the time we got to the end of the hour, people would have forgotten what I said in the beginning of it, because Jung is probably the most complicated of all the great psychologists. His work is dense. It is very difficult to get into, and you have to understand what he meant by various terms, and your meaning of various terms comes from your belief system. And that's the problem here. People get trapped by their beliefs. So anyway, to get back to the story and wind it up to where you can jump in here. I came to understand that there is an interaction between whatever is behind the UFO phenomenon and us, the observers of it. That there is an interaction going on between us and it, whatever it is. And this interaction is subtle. And it's subtle in that we don't sense it. Some people can sense it because I think it's around a lot more than we think. I think that it's around in the daytime. Most people, you see the lights at night. That's when most UFO reports are made. There aren't that many made in the daytime. And the ones made in the daytime are usually a plane in the distance. But I think that UFOs, a plane, a rocket, whatever, something misidentified. But I think that whatever this phenomenon is, and in a book coming out in March, I'll explain exactly what I think it is. It is energy for sure, but it is an intelligent energy, and it interacts with us, and it takes many different forms, and it is doing what it does. It is it's performing a task. That is what it does. The closest I can come to explaining what I mean by that is if you think of the biblical word angel. Angels are defined with one word, usually, messenger. Angels are messengers. And angels deliver messages to individuals that can be very profound. They can be very personal. They can be prophetic, and they can tell people all kinds of things that are happening and going to happen and so on, and also issue warnings. But as a messenger, angels also perform certain actions. Sometimes the message is a message to an entire society by maybe wiping out a city or whatever, like Sodom and Gomorrah is an example where angels supposedly wiped it out. I don't know that's true, but I know that angels are typically thought of as messengers. So angels have different forms, but they serve a function. They have a task. And I think that's what this energy force that propagates the whole UFO phenomenon and the paranormal phenomenon does. It simply is doing what it does. It's not doing anything intentional necessarily to you or to me. It's not popping out intentionally to change someone. And I want to caution that by saying that sometimes it does do it deliberately to individuals. That's another story. Again, that's way too long to get into it here. But there is an intelligent energy out there, and that is what we interact with. Now, I'm all but certain of that. As far as Native Americans go, they believe the exact same thing, that everything is spirit. Everything has spiritual energy and spiritual essence. And spiritual essence always has an intelligence. It has sentience. It has its own consciousness. But it's not like us. We are unique. And I suspect dogs are unique. We can't, I think everything is unique in that sense. We humans have a unique kind of consciousness, and I don't think we can understand the consciousness or the intentions of this energy force. And Native Americans were the same way, that the object wasn't to understand it. Their rituals were all about living in harmony with it, bringing balance to it, because they knew that our interactions with this energy force, whatever it is, determines our fate. So that's kind of a summary of all that. I've taken you from the ET stuff to Carl Jung. I believe a lot of Jung stuff. I've talked before about John Keel and his stuff. And at the end, we're at the point where, the paranormal and UFOs, one and the same. We're just seeing different aspects of the same phenomenon. It's kind of like the old thing. If somebody, the example with the elephant, but I'll use you. If you had a small person, if a small person come into a dark room and Brent Rains is standing there with his arms out, and you allowed that person to just touch one part of your body, well, maybe they'll touch your hand. And you bring another one in and he touches a leg. We bring another one in, he touches your stomach. Another one touches your chest. Another one touches your shoulder. Every one of them is going to have a different idea of what you are, and none of them really are going to know what you really look like. You understand what I'm saying here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the blind man and the elephant. Yeah,
exactly. It's exactly that. I wanted to use you though. I didn't. I'm tired of the elephant example, so I decided to use you.
Pick on me. Huh?
Yes, exactly. So that's kind of a summary, and I know we're actually close to our time here. So do you want to comment on that or ask another quick question? It has to be quick.
Yeah. I told you about this medicine man up in Pennsylvania that I had met twice years ago, back in the 70s and corresponded with. And he talked about the interplanetary craft that, came and visited his people were not really just nuts and bolts. They were spirit, and I know the Hopi, they believed in the UFOs were manned vehicles with the Kachinas. And Kachina meant Ka for respect, and then China for spirit. And so,
Kachinas are tricksters too,
with the UFO. Well, is that, it wouldn't surprise me, but I hadn't really
you
read that.
Can't see what's behind the mask. Just telling you, you can't see what's behind the mask, and if the mask comes off, everything ends. You know, that's basically gigs up. Then that's in their mythology. But Kachinas, you don't
Ah,
get. Go ahead.
yeah.